Okay guys, Andrew Scale Models again. Welcome back. We're up to episode 6 now. I'm still working on our little It's a Leary 35th scale Tiger one. And I've got another project started recently. It goes against the grain for me. I usually try and finish one before I start another, but I couldn't help myself. We'll show you a little bit of a background on that one in a second. But today we want to talk about pigments and how to apply them. There's heaps of different ways to apply pigments and get different effects depending on how you apply them. I'm going to be using these. Now, pigments come in so many different forms, different brands, but they're all basically just a really fine coloured powder. You can use them dry, sort of dusty and staining type effects. You can create three-dimensional effects. They can create mud, snow. In order to do that, you have to give it more body. So you use a base fluid. So in this case, I'll be using an enamel thinner. All right, I'm just using a cheap generic enamel thinner. I'm not wasting my good gear. You need a selection of crappy old used brushes, because using pigments you're inevitably going to stuff your brushes up, so don't use your good brushes. So you can see a sort of thing like this. Used to be a really nice size 4 pointed brush, and you can see what's happened to that. Alright, but for this it's perfect. Alright, a couple of fine ones, a couple of wider sort of flat type ones, and I've got one here that's a really short one. I've cut it right back and it's still sort of soft, but it's really stiff because I've shortened it so much. Alright, so if I'm a little bit heavy handed somewhere with the pigment, I can use this to sort of bail out, get rid of some of it and back it off. Alright, so like in situations where you apply in a sort of darker colour pigment to a lighter surface, if you overdo it, you can get back in there and take a lot of it off. Alright, so bring it back. Now I'm going to use these. That's just an example of some colours. Alright, now used in combination together you can create all sorts of different effects with it. Alright, so rather than show you each individual colour there, I'll show you this. Okay, so this is your pigment range from Vallejo. There's the colours. Comes in the full display stand. We stock Vallejo Pigments and Andrew Scale Models. There's 16 colours. Alright, I'll get in there a bit closer so you can see all those different colours. Whites, ochres, sienna colours, reds, oxide browns, umbers, greens and stuff. Yeah, don't get it, but anyway, yeah, you might find a use in a diorama, I guess. Greys and some iron and sort of black or smoke carbon colours. So there's 16 colours. You can also get pigment binder, which is what I'm going to be using my enamel thinners for. So, but I guess you could use watered down white glue. It's probably endless. You could probably use an acrylic thinner as well. I've not used it, but in this case, I'm using enamels. Alright, so gives you some idea of the uses. Alright. So display base for a figure. On the other side of the leaflet gives you some other examples. None of this is in English, but it doesn't matter. Alright, so really popular for armour kits because it lends itself, Alright, so that's what we're going to be doing today. Vallejo Pigments, earth and oxide. Alright, good stuff. Be really careful with it. First thing I'm going to show you. Alright, it has a tendency to sort of, it's really fine, so it cakes, it settles down in the bottom of the pots, right? It sort of cakes down into a sort of solid lump. I don't know if you can see that, how it's come loose on the bottom there. Alright, every time I use this stuff, I'll give it a bit of a rattle around and I give it a good sort of knock underneath, alright, and it loosens all up. See how that's all come away from the bottom of the bottle now? Alright, okay, alright, so anyway, we've got our bit of track, we've got our enamel thinner ready. Alright, another thing I should mention too, here I've basically cut like a little tray out of a kit model box lid, and that'll keep any excess, because you do lose a lot, alright, It'll keep it confined into this little box. And I use a little bit of paper towel, alright, and I try and work over that paper towel, and then I just use the old faithful, where are they? Little jars. I use these little specimen jars, alright, and you can later on, when you've finished each little session, you can just collect up all the old leftover pigment and just tip into a little jar. You end up mixing all the colours together in there, but each time you do it, put it in another jar, because you'll end up with another colour mixed in there, and you can use it for mud and dirt and stuff like that. It's perfect, right? So you're not throwing away any waste, any excess, so that's a good thing to keep in mind. Alright, so anyway, so we've got our enamel painted piece of track, clear coated with an acrylic clear coat. Now we've got our enamel thinner. Right, so the first thing I'm going to do is start with a darker colour. So we've got here, number 73105. It's a natural sienna, and I've got a dark sort of red ochre. Alright, 107. Alright, now just to get started, we'll start with these. Alright, dark colour, alright, as a base, and then you can lighten it up with a lighter colour over the top. It'll show up. And then at the end of the job, if you want to go through little areas here and there, you can kind of create sort of highlights in certain spots with an even lighter colour, either like a sort of fleshy, sort of rusty colour, alright, or got like, where is it? That's yellow ochre. There's also a couple of other different colours. That's like a dust, desert dust. Alright, so you can create little highlights with lighter colours. Alright, so anyway, we've got a little bit. Now this side here, I'm happy with that. Alright, that's eventually going to end up on my tank. You're not going to see a lot of it anyway. Alright, but I find it's a lot easier to do this now than glue it on there and then have to get in there later. You can't get underneath there like that. So, alright. Alright, so that's going to end up being in here. Alright. Alright. Anyway, let's start a little bit of work. Alright, so select a brush to carry your thinner. And don't be too scared to apply the thinner. You don't have to slap it on there, but just wet your brush and load up a little section. And do a little section at a time. Don't go crazy. Right? Keep that brush for your thinner. Then choose a brush to actually apply, and that's why I like that one. It sort of picks the pigment up out of the pot. Now remember, if you change colour, use a different brush, or clean the brush out first, give it a sort of relatively good dry, and then you can use it in a different colour, especially going from a dark colour into a light colour. Alright, so we're starting with our dark colour, in this case the ochre. Alright, and remember, give it a tap, get it moving. Alright. Now when you open these, first thing you'll see is how fine the powder is. Alright, so don't breathe it in and blow it around. Okay, now there's a little bit in that cap there, and that is alright, easy enough to pick up. So you can pick it up with your brush in a dry form and apply it to the track where you've put your thinner. Alright, so pick up some more. Alright, now it's going to look really strong on the camera, but remember we can go back, alright, and lighten it up with different colours. Alright, now what that's done, that's instantly adhered to that moistened surface, the surface I've wetted with the enamel thinner. Alright, but you can also give it a quick blow. Alright, now that'll stick and eventually dry. Now it's always darker when you first apply it. When the thinner dries and evaporates, that'll come back to its actual colour, and it won't be so dark and so in your face. Alright, so you can also just take it straight from the pot and apply it dry. Alright, alright, alright. Remember to try and keep your dust level down. Now it won't adhere as well to the dry surface, alright, but it's a good way of applying it without overdoing it, because it's easier to brush the excess off. So you can just work all the way along like this, along the track, applying it dry onto a dry surface. Alright, keep your brush for that colour, and then come back with your thinners brush, remembering where you started, back down here, sort of the fourth link in, and just apply the thinners over the top. Right, now initially it looks like it washes it off, but trust me, all it's doing is binding it to the surface, and it soaks through the pigment. So just keep applying it like that, and it will flow on its own, so you don't have to paint it on, just dab it on, right? You don't want to be scrubbing your pigment off again by actually using brush strokes. Just dab it on there. Now initially you panic because it looks like it really darkens up. Alright, you can see how that's working. But as that dries, it'll dry back to its lighter natural sort of form. Alright. And just remember, not too much action with the brush, just all you're doing is carrying the thinner from the jar to the model surface. Alright, to the dry pigment. Alright, now, just to sort of speed it up, give that brush a bit of a clean so it takes any of that coloured pigment out. So I can now use that brush to carry the thinner and apply or set a different colour. Alright, so it's not going to mix. Alright, so I'll just quickly close that, and we'll go to a lighter colour. So we'll go to that natural sienna. Again, bit of a shake up, so we're going to put this lighter sort of sandy, dusty, browny, dirty colour on. European Earth is my favourite colour for this, but I ran out of it. Alright, now, if you work quick enough, you don't have to apply any more thinner. It's dried off here where we first did it, alright, because we put the dry pigment on top of the wet thinner. But here further along, we've put dry pigment first, then we've wet it, alright, so it's still drying, so we can quickly go in here with a different coloured pigment. Remember, sort of work out, I'm trying to do this in front of the camera so you can see what I'm doing, but if in essence I would be working really close down here. Alright, now don't just heavily apply it everywhere now, alright, you just want to sort of touch this on, because you would want this colour to sort of just create a different tonal effect, sort of like this. Alright, you don't need much, this is the second layer. Alright, just here and there. Alright, and what we're doing is basically mixing the colours so we come to a sort of a overall sort of muddy, dirty look. Alright, remember, you don't have to be too fussy. Like I said, once this part of the section of the track is applied to the model, you're not going to see 3/4 of that track. Alright, okay, so that's alright. Now, if you've, like I said before, if you've overdone it, you can always take some off. Alright, and I don't want it to be too thick. I don't want it to have caked on mud. I'm just trying to make it look dirty and used and worn or whatever. Dirt left over, dried dirt. Alright, now you can see that sort of looks a little bit yellow. Alright, but when I go in here to set it, alright, it'll darken up again. Alright, we don't want that colour to disappear, so I'm just putting a little bit more thinner over the top, and that sets the colour in place. Cures it, if you like. And then we can just leave that. Only takes about a half an hour. Once the thinners is evaporated, and thinners dries really quick, let's face it. Alright, you can go back and add more colours. Alright, so just work along like that. And now we've set the pigment in place so it won't come off. And later on, maybe a couple of hours later, in fact, I probably wouldn't even do it until I've actually glued this section of track onto the model itself. I'll go in with a clear coat, and I'll just use an acrylic clear, and that'll seal our job. and protect it. Alright, so that gives you an idea. So we've basically gone, using this as an example, that's your original moulded colour of the plastic, the grey from the kit. We've turned it into this. Alright, now that's just a really basic way of showing you how to apply it. Alright, so you can see that's still reflecting in the light. Alright, so the thinners is still wet, but you can see down this end how it's drying back. Alright, so give it sort of 10-15 minutes, let the 20 minutes or so, let the thinners completely evaporate and dry, and then ascertain as to whether you're happy with that colour. Now if I compare that to the tank sections that I've already done, I'll just flip this over. Alright, that looks quite red. Alright, underneath it's completely different. Alright, that's more sort of darker tones, okay, but you'll get there eventually, and you just keep changing, and you know, there's, like I said, there's no rules with this. You just go nuts and do whatever you think looks appropriate. Alright, so we can even go now with another sort of a browner colour, and this is like a lighter colour, that one is. So you want to sort of highlight certain parts of it. Alright, open your pot. Alright, now this brush is the brush I'm using to carry from one pot to another. Alright, so I want to just give that a quick wipe off, take any excess of the other colours out. Alright, because that brush is dry, you don't have to worry. Just give it a good flick out and against a bit of paper towel, and you'll clean all that excess colour up. We've still got our clean enamel thinner brush. Alright, and you can check that by just putting in the thinner. If you unload it onto your paper towel, you can see it's coming out clean. Alright, and then go with your next colour, the little highlight colour. Alright, you can see this section down here, it's still wet, so I can get a little tiny bit of this light sort of rust colour and just get in there with that, and that tiny little bit of enamel thinner will take that up. Alright. Alright. Let that dry just for a second. Okay, so you can see that in there. You see how different that colour is. And I just want to knock it back a little bit. Alright. And again, while your brush is loaded with it, you can come down here where it's drier. Grab a little bit more if you want. Just here and there, just random. It's kind of, you're trying to make it look natural, right? So, but this is the thing with pigments, right? It's not sort of, well, it's semi-permanent, I guess. You're kind of going to stain the colour, but if you overdo it, just get in there and brush it out. Alright. Alright, and just remember, this stuff is so thin and so fine. Alright, you've got to be really careful breathing, and if you're sort of working on a part and you're sort of trying to blow it dry, you've got to be careful you don't blow all this pigment all over the joint and it ends up everywhere. Alright, eventually that will look like that. Alright, okay. Alright, now the only other thing I'd do with this, once I've glued that on a kit, by the time I get it on there, that'll be completely dry. I'll be able to give that a clear acrylic clear coat to just seal it all in. Alright, but I'll work on this further to get match the colour up with the rest of the tank and the rest of the tracks that I've already done. Alright, so just remember, if you're using, well, in my case I'm using a lacquer base or enamel based paint to paint the bare plastic part first, just as a base colour. Alright, then I'm putting a clear acrylic coat on to seal that in, so it doesn't get washed off or eaten off with the enamel thinner I'm using to adhere the pigment. Alright, so there you go. So that's Vallejo Pigment, and that's just 3 or 4 colours that I've used there quickly to show you. Alright, and then later on too, you can go in with little nail files or whatever, sanding sticks, and you can take the top off the little detail parts on the track links, and it highlights those colours as well. A kit that I sold through my shop quite some time ago to a customer, regular customer. Months later, well, geez, it was a long time, he brought it back in the shop complaining about the quality of the kit. Now, that's fine. I can cop that. He wasn't asking for a refund. He didn't want his money back. He just wanted to have I think he just wanted to vent. Okay. This is Trumpeter's 1/350 scale USS Ticonderoga CV-14, World War II carrier. I think it went all the way through to Korea, as a matter of fact. But anyway, I'm not really up on its history. It's a fairly large kit. I'll just quickly show you. I'm not sure if it'll fit in the camera. No, obviously it won't. There you go. So it's bigger than my mat. Let's see, what is it? Actually should tell me on there, shouldn't it? On the box art it'll tell me. That's the kit. Alright, 1/350 scale. Okay. Well, there you go, 700mm long, or nearly 800mm long. Okay, so it's fairly long. Okay, comes with all the aircraft. Doesn't include any etch. I'm a bit disappointed, but this is a bit of an older kit, I think. Alright, now I'm not sure if this is an old moulding, or I know there was a re-release of it at one point. I'm not sure that this is the one. Alright, comes with the 5 different aircraft, and you can, that's one thing I do like about the aircraft, the clear parts. It comes with clear parts, I can't believe it. But anyway, and you can display them in takeoff or whatever, and you can display them with folded wings. Alright, but that's the spine of the box. Alright, okay, but now the kit, according to the customer, and now that I've had a good look at it, I sort of think he's fairly warranted. But anyway, has some issues. Alright, so that's the box art there. And just so we clear, there's your kit number 05609. Okay, Ticonderoga. One thing I noticed, he was complaining of the fact, the first thing, he was complaining about he couldn't fit this deep red section of the hull. Is a separate part, obviously. Also included in the kit is the waterline plate. Okay, alright, now in the manual, and I found it, I won't show you now, but in the manual it explains to you, if you want to build the full hull version, don't glue this on. If you glue this on and then try and fit that hull section, it's not going to fit. Alright, that was the first complaint that I got. So he's actually left me this kit to build. Alright, and I think he was kind of offering me a challenge and show me how you make this fit, Andrew. So anyway, we've managed to pry this off. We've got that off. It wasn't very well glued on, and it wasn't a very good fit. Alright, and we've managed to get the hull on. Okay, now again, in the customer's defense, it also isn't a very good fit, but it isn't a really bad fit either. Okay, it's not perfect, but the one thing I did notice, that with the bow section, this little section's separate, that glues in later, you're left with this roaring gap here. Okay, now, okay, that was a bad fit. Alright, so if we go to the instructions, what we're talking about at the front of the ship is this piece here. So this is the hull, glues to the front end here, which glues to the base hull part. Here you're left with a gap. Okay, now one thing I did notice, and it's the same with the bottom hull section as well, this is the waterline plate. Okay, now we're building kit number 05609. Wonder what it says on here. I've got it upside down. Oh, look at that. SX 05602. Okay, now somebody out there might know better than me, and that's fine. Great, if you do, let me know. But it appears to me that this hull section and the waterline plate are actually moulded for another kit. This fits perfectly with, well, not perfectly, but it's a good enough fit, right? With filler, a bit of sanding, I'll be able to make that work, no problem. All right, so what I guess they're trying to tell me is that the hull of the USS Ticonderoga is exactly the same as the SX. Now that may be the case. I have no idea, and I don't really give a shit. But anyway, There you go, that could be part of the issue. Now, the other issue, I noticed when I pulled all this off, the sprue gates hadn't been cleaned off properly, so that's going to make it hard to make it fit as well. This section up here, so in here, the first level, the flight deck, the internal section, especially this front bit, was completely out of alignment, so nothing else could fit. As soon as you put something in wrong and glue it in there, and you go to fit the next level and it doesn't fit, you got to work back. And obviously it was the fact that this was out of alignment. Now it was all glued in here, so, and they're thin parts, so I was worried about trying to get that out without breaking it, so I've left it, and I've just worked around that. So what it's ended up leaving me is with a gap here, which is roughly filled. That's nice and dry now, so I'll be able to sand all this back and get that sort of looking good. And I also left a gap here, vertical gap here. Now, if I can get in enough, you might be able to see little bits of evergreen sheet, evergreen plastic card. And I've glued it in there first to fill the main part of the gap, like you can see on this side. Alright, and then I can go over a bit of filler, sand that back, that fills that void. Alright, now I've gone ahead and I've glued all this section in. It's as best a fit as I can get, right? But I did notice, so this is the front section of the deck here. Now it's a really tight fit, alright, but it does actually fit. Okay, so even though we've ended up with a gap here and this gap here, it's not perfect in here, out of my control, but this, the correct forward section of the carrier deck, actually does fit. With a little bit of forethought and dry fitting, so going through the sections and working in the correct sequence, you know, step 1, step 2, etc. Even if you just tack glue these parts in first, or tack this on so you can easily remove it later, at least by doing that, after you've cleaned all the sprue gates properly, you can double check that everything's going to fit. You know, is it a crap kit because it doesn't fit? Well, I've built far worse than this. Alright, so just a little bit of patience. Okay, this is going to create more work for me, but that's all part of the hobby. You know, $100 kit or something, I think it was, $110 or something. Probably worth more than that now if you can still get it. To just chuck it, I don't get that. Alright, I think some of us have forgotten the whole art of modelling. It's not always as simple as it seems, and they actually do talk about this kit being more for the advanced modeller. I don't think that's the case, to be honest. I just think it needs a bit of forethought and the right materials, good fillers, good glues, bit of patience, allow things time to cure and set. So once you get it in place and glue in place, clamp it and leave it, walk away, go have a coffee, come back an hour and a half and you can take your clamps off and the thing will be fixed. Alright, so there you go. So that's going to be the next project, right, which we've already started, the Ticonderoga. Okay, so that'll be there. Alright, and the next time we come back and visit, hopefully we'll be a bit further with the tank as well, the Tiger one, and we can show you some more finished model then. Okay, cheers.